Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, also known as
Snake Bros.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau.
It's pretty good.
The first thing I need to do is claim that I'm dumb. From a couple of shows ago, we were talking about redshift, and I said that Hubble was the guy who made the catalog of galaxies, and that's false. Hubble did point out that stuff with redshift was wrong, but the guy who made the catalog of strange galaxies is called something ARP. It's called the ARP catalog.
Halton ARP?
Yeah, Halton ARP. Yeah, it's called the ARP catalog of strange galaxies or whatever. And like it's actually really interesting to look through. They use the Hubble telescope to look at every single one of those ARP galaxies, and there are fantastic photographs of them online now that you can look at. So I'll stick a couple of them in the show notes. Some of the weirder ones where they've like one galaxy has basically blown through the center of another one and blown it apart like it's a bullet.
Yeah. That's freaking badass.
Yeah, but he like the redshift on those was, so it was ARP basically. I said it was Hubble. So Hubble was involved and the Hubble telescope was involved, but yeah, got that totally wrong. So wanted to start out with that. And I think we're going to probably talk about that some, but first, news. Unexpected trumpets from the sky. And a little mariachi there.
Sorry about that.
Unexpected mariachi. So in Hawaii, go ahead, bro. You pulled this story.
Oh, no.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Like when you get there on a ship, you get off, you expect to hear the freaking the Hawaiian music, but no, this time it's like apocalyptic trumpets from the sky.
Yeah.
And nobody's dancing with, grass skirts.
But it was more like crazy noises like that.
That's right. Terrifying. Do we have a soundbite?
Yeah, hold on. Let me play it.
From the top.
Yeah, I've got a soundbite. Hold on, here it is. It's a YouTube video, and I don't know who posted it, but all right, here it is. So that's it. The guy's just like looking around towards the setting sun. It looks like maybe it's the rising sun, but and
the video
it was
itself
published on April 10th.
Yeah. April
By
10th.
Repeat.
Repeat. Repeat.
The video looks like it's going so slow that it seems like the whole thing is in slow motion. So
And I
I
think
want to try speeding it up.
yeah, because
what
the
happens.
sound too, like when I was listening to it that time and you hear this like sound, I thought it was a helicopter the first time, but I think that's his car engine.
Yeah, so let's
Slow
speed it
down,
up.
yeah.
Let's speed it up and see what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was 50% sped up.
Yeah.
But this is just the audio takeoff of the video. The video to me looks slow, so we'd probably have to like if it's
Stick
a
it in
hoax,
Final Cut.
yeah, if it's a hoax, we need to stick it in Final Cut and speed it up because the video is so slow and smoothly moving back and forth, looking around the scenery. It just doesn't look.
Yeah, I mean, there's even a
Real
part.
time.
There's even a part where you can see individual frames. Like it's not a stutter, but like as the camera is panning back to the left, it's like ding, ding, ding. You can see, the stop motion action, which definitely implies that he used some kind of slowdown feature that does not have a smoothing, or a blur. So,
Now I guess that could be the built-in sort of
the camera itself.
Yeah, the no shaking
Right.
thingy.
Yeah, but usually they'll get the frames per second right on those, So like unless he's using like a really low capacity camera that takes 10 frames per second, that just looked really strange.
Yeah, but I tried speeding it up 100%.
Yeah.
So it's twice as fast, and it just there's nowhere where
Everything suddenly sounds
right like it was.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't try to keep going. It just seems like things start getting so high. It sounds
sounds wrong.
It's not like messing around with audio in the studio. You can record some guitars or something and then slow them down so much that they sound like something like that. So I was thinking if I start heading faster and faster, it might start to speed up and sound like just some bullshit on his radio in his car, but it never does.
Yeah.
Start to sound like that.
Right. We went way up and down with it, and like the horn, quote unquote, horn sounds always sounded weird.
Yeah.
And it just got to a point to where the rest of the background noises became too high pitched to be plausible.
Yeah.
So whatever. Even if he slowed it down, apparently he was really hearing horn sound. I don't know why we would have slowed the video down. Maybe
It's
to
probably
make them more
not
ominous, as opposed to. Yeah, exactly. So, like, somebody recently gave a call out for more trumpets. More trumpets have come. Request answered.
Yeah. So there's been a whole bunch of these sounds reported and videos taken of them, and you can see them on YouTube. And then even NASA has sort of quote unquote confirmed that they are natural or something.
We here at NASA confirm that these are real and they are absolutely nothing to worry about. We knew about them all along.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it
We
goes.
found out 90% of the reasons why they happen. There's a website also called skysounds.com, or maybe it's .org. I'm not sure, but it's run by Micah Hanks, who is the host of the Gralien Report podcast, and him and his brother started the website I think in 2013 specifically for this issue because there were so many videos just popping up and it was like a phenomenon. So they on that website there's two different kinds of sound. They're classified into two different kinds. Basically, you have the trumpets or sort of note type noises, and then there's a percussive or explosion or gun. Like the ones in North Carolina are called the Seneca guns. They've been happening for hundreds of years. So there's two kinds: the ones that sound like explosions, and then there's the ones that sound like instruments. And then they have these interactive Google Maps that has all these places plotted where they've been heard. And they try to do as much confirmation as possible. Like somebody posts like that the sounds were heard or whatever. They kind of look at it and say, okay, is this really? Does it match exactly the audio from some other video, which has happened. People have just taken the audio from somebody else's video and just stuck it over top of theirs and said like, I heard them too here in Colorado, and it's like totally fake. But the explosion sounds are really strange. Like if you go on YouTube and just search for
sky booms,
booming noises before Colorado earthquake. Because this happened, like these two guys were hiking in the mountains at about half an hour before the most recent, which was 2011, 2012 Colorado earthquake that was real big, and they just started hearing these enormous percussive noises and they sound like if you listen to them with headphones on, it sounds like the noises start from far off and they're, but it gets louder and closer and and then it seems to go away from them after that, and they're like standing there looking around all over the place with their camera trying to figure out where it's coming from. It literally sounds like something underground, like it's traveling through a tunnel and just like hitting the wall as it gets closer, like boom, hitting the wall, and it gets closer and boom, hits the wall again. It's really creepy sounding. So and it was somehow associated with the earthquake. And all, these guys put it on there, and the same thing happened. They were like, yeah, those kind of sounds are, they're normal.
It wasn't an earthquake because the shaking originated from the sky, Russ. The sky shook the ground, therefore it was not an earthquake.
That's right. It was just a shaking. There's also another really strange one from Florida. I'm just calling out these ones because I remember going through these and finding the weirdest ones. There was one from Florida where it was kind of in between the percussive and the trumpet sounds. It was sort of halfway. Think of like a train going by. So it's like that, so it's making a note, but it's also really percussive. And the dude that's recording it, he kicks on his video. It's nighttime. I think it's in Florida. I might be wrong. It could be in Virginia. I don't know, but he's looking out towards a river and he's like, it sounds like it's coming from the river. And he goes outside and he's like kind of walking around in his neighborhood and he's like, okay, I can't find a source. And it really feels like it's coming from the ground. And you can hear it the whole time. Like, it's crazy.
Wow.
It sounds like a really fast train is going past him, like in a tunnel underground or something. It's really weird.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we're all going to die, basically, is what I'm saying. It's whoever it is that tunnels underground and builds giant bases with the aliens, and they're probably going to kill us all. So
yeah, but I mean, I can see how this can be a natural phenomenon. Like just having worked,
it's natural to build giant underground bases and kill everybody. Yeah,
having worked with transducers, that convert an energy in one type to an energy in another type. Some transducers convert a type of energy into, wave action in a medium that's totally not associated with the energy type that was being converted. So it's plausible that there are, focused energies or something coming from outer space that once they impact in the atmosphere, there could be basically a transduction of that energy into sound waves.
Yeah, so I had thought before that maybe something gets into the Van Allen belts and causes them to fluctuate against the upper atmosphere.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something like that.
And now that I've been looking into the electric universe hypothesis, that also seems like a plausible scenario for
plasma
that.
Discharges.
Yeah.
And we've been having the big aurora borealis recently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So because we had there was a coronal mass ejection recently. Not an X class or anything, but it was the class down from X. So it's not existential dangerous, but it still could cause signal problems or whatever. And they had kind of warned people, and then the guys at the ISS had to run into their lead cubes. But the ejection was aimed directly at Earth, so this big ball of coronal gas from the sun basically got belched out, and it's highly charged, extremely charged, full of energy, and it just impacts the Earth. But long before it actually gets to the Earth, it starts interacting with the Earth's magnetic field and the Van Allen belts, and I think there's something in that interaction that causes it, because that's what causes the aurora. Which is a plasma discharge in the upper atmosphere. So,
I need to look into that more. That's pretty badass.
But that would be I was imagining you're somewhere up in the Arctic Circle and you're looking up at the sky and there's this crazy green and blue shifting fire, and then you start hearing these trumpets. That would be fucking crazy.
Yeah, for sure. The guy must have edited out the part of the video where he was like, "Oh my god, what the?"
Yeah, and a lot of them, you do hear people talking about it, asking questions. And what's interesting though is that you'll see, because they're kind of looking around to see what it is making the sound, and you'll see some people in the video, just random pedestrians looking up at the sky as well, but other people just don't even pay attention. They just keep on walking. They don't even look, and you're like, that guy, he's asleep.
Probably had his headphones in. No idea what was happening.
Yeah.
But that's pretty cool. So
it's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah.
So anything else in the news?
Nope.
Nope.
There's nothing happening. I mean, nothing. All that LiDAR, and there's just nothing happening down there.
I did go and try to find more information on the caves that you talked about a couple of shows ago. The ones that were full of water.
Yeah.
That have they've been inundated with, they've been basically immersed in water because of the rising sea levels at the end of the ice age. But they have architecture and burial graves, like graves in them and bodies. And like in the articles I'm reading, they're referring to both the architecture and the skeletons or the graves as being Maya. And I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
So am I, and I actually wrote this on the web. I was like, am I to understand that the Mayan civilization is now thought to have lasted from 13,000 BC to 1500 AD?
Right.
Because that's what we're talking about.
That's what they were saying in the story, is that like they're finding these burial chambers that are underwater.
Yeah.
So, and that water's been there since the end of the last ice age.
Exactly.
It's risen up, and it's like, so what they built this stuff underwater in a cave system that they couldn't see in.
Right.
They didn't have lights.
Yeah.
Or was the water not there when they built it?
So if the water was not there, which is the assumption you have to make, that they didn't make any architecture deep underwater, right? Because they had butt flaps, not scuba gear.
Right.
So we had the assumption of the most primitive butt flap, right? That however they did it, they had to do it the most primitive possible way, which means that they had to do it 13,000 years ago when there was no water in the cave. Right. But I mean, like even if they had scuba gear, like no one's gonna bury somebody underwater, like
right. I know that's what's so ridiculous about it.
Right. But I didn't. Maybe you did. I just didn't catch it the first time you were reading it. But I didn't hear that article you were reading referred to them as being Maya. Right. I was just like, when I read that in the article, I was like, wait a minute. This guy just said that these are 9,000 to 13,000 years old, and then he said they're Mayan, and I'm like, what? And they actually went on a discussion about how interesting it was that the morphology of the skulls are so different from the modern indigenous Mayans, and I'm like, that's because they're not the same. Fuck. It isn't. Never mind. Yeah.
I thought. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I thought they were saying that too. That like it was all the Mayan, like the Maya worshipped these.
Yeah.
There were these holes that they could go down into, and they like built these structures around the holes that would go down into the
cenotes.
caves.
Yeah,
but they're like full of water.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
They go down in there, and there's like all these artifacts and things that they built.
Yeah,
and it's like, how did they build a burial area underwater in a cave? It doesn't make any sense. And why would you bury somebody? Like, what did they go down there with shovels?
Well, they were
and dig underwater
to bury
to bury someone,
the body that floats.
Come on.
Yeah. Well, maybe they were followers of the drowned god.
Yeah, they went down there to bury themselves.
Yeah, they went down there to. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, some of that stuff was pretty grim. Some of the stuff that they were finding was obviously.
But they were also in there with all these megafauna bones and shit.
Right. Yeah. So maybe washed in there with the cataclysmic events or whatever. Who knows? But they found like enormous amounts of children too, which is like that's terrible. Basically, like looks like they were sacrificing children into the cenotes.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to be old, right? I mean, they could throw somebody down there.
Yeah. I'm
the old stuff is like the stuff that was constructed down in there.
Yeah, and the ones that were buried and like have like what looks like a mound of rocks and then some kind of marker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's bones strewn all throughout the caves from things that have fallen into cenotes and died in various ways or whatever, but yeah, there was definitely people down in there before there was water.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I know that the Maya had a thing with sacrifice as a method of like appeasing the gods to keep the destruction of the world from happening. So
yeah,
that who knows? Maybe they were right. We should just sacrifice lots of people. That's how you stop global warming, folks.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's basically what they want to do. Yeah, so that was weird, that referring to them as Mayans, but yeah, I can't think of anything else in the news. So, okay. The Thunderbolts project. We should talk about this.
Yeah.
So I've kind of paid attention to it off and on over time. I started out like with a very negative impression, but it was because all of my interactions with it were from like these zealots, that they're like the harpies. They bring it up for everything. Every conversation they're like the Thunderbolts project, electric universe. I'm like, God, just shut up. It's like those people on YouTube that you see where every atmospheric phenomenon, they're like harp. And I call them the harpies. That's all they do is talk about harp. So that was my initial interaction with the Thunderbolts project. And I was like, I just didn't, I was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, eventually I heard some actual interviews with the physicist. What's his name? Wallace Thornhill?
Thornhill, yeah.
Yeah, he's a physicist from Australia and very reasonable, very like rational response to lots of problems in physics. So I immediately was like, okay, this is badass because he thinks like we do on the whole, like, he's looking at these problems and he talks about stacks of assumptions and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So that turned me around quick. I was just like, all right, this is badass. Some of his, and once you look at it that way, you drop the whole, like, this is ridiculous idea because you're like, well, this is an idea that people are working on. Some of it's going to be wrong. Not a big deal. Right?
Yeah.
There's not this all or nothing kind of approach that modern science seems to want to have. Like, it's either totally right or we just miss it completely,
Yeah.
So
I think it's pretty cool because I just started looking into it last week, and looking into it, by that I mean I downloaded lectures and stuff by the guy, Wallace Thornhill, and been sifting through those. And some of them are, it took me a while to find some that get really into the technical details. Most of them, or many of them, are just more sort of like general ideas. And I'm like, okay, yes, you can just say, well, that's obviously, it's an electrical phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't really tell me anything.
Right.
So I kept looking, and I eventually started finding these little nuggets in various lectures, and even one radio show that he did with on Fade to Black. Yeah, that was
with Jimmy Church. Jimmy Church, y'all.
Yeah, that was pretty good. But I think it's really cool because he sort of began his, the idea that I get is that he began his approach kind of in the same way that I did, looking at like like these weird problems. Like one of them is the speed of light is not a constant.
Yeah.
Right. It's obviously not a constant, and that's a major problem when it comes to the standard model using the speed of light as a constant
To make the math work. Yeah.
Right. And when you do that, then other things have to bend, like space and time.
Right.
So one of the
I like it. So, like, you can point in the directions of space. Like that way is, you got the dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, but point in the direction of time.
Just all you have to do is just point for a while.
Yeah, just point for t plus n plus 1, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was one of the things that kind of got me thinking, like, okay, light seems to have the properties of any other, well, since I deal with sound a lot, I'm thinking light seems to have the same sort of properties that sound does. Like it is governed by the same basic principles, which is the medium through which it travels. So, I started out, okay, so let's assume that this idea that the ether is not there. Let's say that idea is wrong, that there is something there that light is traveling through. And that's kind of what he did too. And he's, of course he's a physicist, so he knows a bunch of shit about electricity that I don't know. And they're doing all these studies with plasma and finding out that plasma in the laboratory sort of behaves in a very similar way to what like we're seeing out in the cosmos with our radio telescopes, being able to see these long, what they call filaments.
Yeah, these mega structures of,
these filaments that pass through, they go all the way across galaxies and stuff. And within the filaments are these strings of stars, like little, dots that are lit up along these filaments. And I'm not really, I don't fully understand any of that yet, but basically the idea is that somehow there's these, the electrical force has both an attraction and repulsion force.
It's polarized,
right? Yeah. So as far as I understand it, at a distance, things that are electrically charged are attracted towards each other, but once they get close, they don't want to touch.
Yeah.
They try to repel each other.
Because it's magnetic. Yeah.
Right. So the other thing that they talk about is that there are... I lost where I was going with that. The basic point is that the idea of gravity, gravity only has one...
It's non-polarized.
Right,
yeah.
it's non-polarized. It's like it only attracts. And so they're saying, well, this is why we have, these systems of where you have a star and you have the planets that are arranged in such a way. There's both the attractive force that's pulling the planets around a star, but they're also the repelling force that won't allow them to touch. So
which balances things out. Like,
right.
He goes into a lot like with only a pulling force, you can't really have a stable system because if one thing goes off a tiny bit, the pulling force just keeps pulling it into worse and worse states, and it becomes extremely unstable immediately.
Right.
But if you've got, like a pushing and a pulling force on either side, that'll hold it in the stable position and tend to correct any errors that may happen. Yeah.
Right. The other thing that he talks about is what we were just talking about on one of the previous podcasts. I think the one you were talking about with the Hubble, redshift.
The redshift, yes.
They talk about that. They talk about the idea that things can shift drastically in a very short amount of time, and it's due to the forces in these plasma fields, these plasma filaments. Brett's saying comets make way more sense. Yes,
yeah, they do.
So
a lot of like stars, basically in the electric universe, a star is basically like a large gas planet. Basically, you can look at it as like an enormous Jupiter that is being fluorescently lit by this electric charge that's going through.
Right.
And the charge itself is like part of an enormous filament that goes elsewhere. So the source of energy is external to the sun is not the source of the energy. And it's only, he points out that the outer edge, the outer surface of the sun is far hotter than anything that we can detect in the interior, which is why sunspots are dark. It's weird. You would expect that when this hole opens up in the surface of the sun, that it should be brighter down in there because that's where all the pressure and heat
according to
is.
the standard model. That's
where the fusion
is taking place down inside,
and yet the sunspots are black because it's not as hot down in there. They're actually colder, and they try to explain that away with magnetic chicanery, but really it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it does make sense if it's just a sort of a huge dense gas giant planet that is being fluoresced by an enormous amount of electrical energy passing.
Yeah. And also that it doesn't it's the same thing we were talking about before, that there's this huge problem in our cosmological model, and that is that we're basing the densities of these planets and bodies out in space on these mathematical equations that have to do with the spectrography and the redshift changes that and all this sort of thing. So even the density of our own moon that they're figuring based on the gravitational pull and the size and all this kind of stuff, they're figuring out these density. All of that could be wrong, which is what Halton Arp was basically pointing out. So not only can they be much less dense than the standard model would assume based on the idea that matter is the source of gravity, but that they can be so much closer together because the redshift problem goes away as well.
Right. Basically what he ends up saying is we don't know how old the universe is or how big it is or how long this has been going on, because all of those things have been based on these stacks of assumptions that lead people to this model where they can say, based on the redshift, that tells us how far away it is and how massive it is. And if that's all wrong, then you basically end up with, I think of it as we kind of float on an island of about 4,000 to 6,000 years of recorded history. We don't know how much how big the ocean of time is before that or afterwards. It's like, so we have this little island of known time. We know that there was time before it. We just don't know how much, right? Same thing with the universe. Like we have this, except that with the Earth, we have a way to physically measure it, and with the moon, and maybe most of our solar system. But with any stars and more distant or quote unquote distant objects, we don't really know how far away they are.
Yeah.
And he has a really simple way of exposing like the weak spots in the standard model, which I found fascinating. Like the way he talks about how so it's the lightest element known, hydrogen gas, is going to somehow magically coalesce and then collapse into a star, right? It's hydrogen that's doing this, right? The lightest gas known. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But I do wonder, I have questions for him. Like I want to know how the plasma, if the plasma is is fluorescing the sun, where do the heavier elements come? Like, is there fusion taking place because of this? Like, how do we get the heavier elements from the hydrogen gas? Or are they postulating that the universe is a steady state because they think the Big Bang is, he says it's hogwash.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's still a lot of research to do. Like I just got started on this thing too, but it's interesting to me that the model that they're developing seems to answer a lot of these questions, and it's like I recognize that type of idea where once you grasp it really well, then you start to ask questions about these problems in the standard model, and you're like, oh, it's obvious.
Exactly.
Which is a very similar thing that we experienced when we were working on the elastic universe idea, and I think the two could
complement each other.
Yeah, complement each other very well.
I really liked the point that he made on that video you told me to listen to about where metals and other interesting elements come from in the Earth's crust, like these enormous like thunderbolts are hitting the surface of the planet from the close passes of other planets, and that like generates these metals and stuff in the surface. I was like, that's bad. So that gives you a way to look for this stuff. Like, I need to find ancient lightning strikes, right? Fulgurites.
But that kind of answers your previous question, is that like, yes, fusion is happening.
Right, but I want to know what the process is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that he says, is that we need more labs doing studies on plasma, because there's so much we don't know that we can repeat in the laboratory. Yeah. That plasma can do. So I think they're on to something for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's really interesting too when you start looking at the ancient texts, which he's also done. Yeah. And they're Velikovsky is one of the people that inspired him, but these ideas that the ancients were writing about how the sun stood still in the sky for 3 days or whatever. So then he goes and looks on the other side of the world. Are there any ancient texts over there where it was dark for 3 days? Yeah. And sure enough, he finds those. And but he's made a lot of predictions too that have also come true. Yeah.
Like the impact of the comet, where they shot, or NASA shot basically a heavy slug at the comet, and he predicted the way that there would be an electrical flash right before he reached it, and they were a lot of like, and then of course it did this huge flash right before it reached it. Yep.
And then also the density of that comet. Yeah. Like they were saying, oh, it's just going to be like all fluffy and shit, and then it hit it and it was just like, dang. Yeah. They're like, how can it be that dense? Yeah. It's like, well,
it must be hollow.
Right. So it really does make a lot of sense. It's really cool to think about.
The other thing that they've done that's really fascinating in terms of the ancients is they have shown, and they've done this like over and over with laboratory equipment. So like they have these plasma generators in the lab where they can basically mess with magnetic fields and plasma. And this guy has shown that there are these standard forms that plasma will take based on these basic magnetic fields, and they look like a lot of ancient petroglyphs.
Right, the shaman.
Yeah,
or the shaman,
the standing man with the circles between, that is a plasma form.
Yeah.
When you look at it, and they said that the only ones that aren't represented in the geoglyphs are ones that would kill you if you were seeing them, which makes sense, right? If anybody saw them, everybody died, because they're heavily they cause a lot of radiation or whatever. So
Yeah, that's cool. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and keep talking about snakes in the universe.
And plasma snakes. Dragon.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. We're talking about electricity in the universe
And snakes.
giant serpents of plasma.
That's right.
Arcing across galaxies,
Space
and
dragons.
making things happen. So yeah, let's get back into it. So once again, I would like to give the disclaimer that I don't fully understand the theory of the electric universe yet. There's a lot there to look into. So continuing to do the deep dive down the rabbit hole of Wallace Thornhill's electric universe.
Down the plasma tube?
Down the plasma tube, yeah, that's right. So essentially, gravity is not what we think it is. It is an electrical phenomenon that has both the push and pull. So the locations of the planets in our solar system are arranged, basically matching both of those. We're drawn towards each other. We're drawn towards the sun, but we're also repelled from each other.
Right.
And
that's all based on systems of waves. So there's like resonances, and we kind of sit right. Isn't that the idea?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's that weird there's that weird equation that shows where each orbit should be.
Right.
And it's based on like this,
Right.
this system of resonance. Yeah.
So Velikovsky wrote a book called Worlds in Collision, which postulated that another planet had come by Earth very closely, and there was a huge like electrical arcs or multiple lightning bolts that
Thunderbolts of the gods.
Yeah, that screwed up the surface of the planet, and that it was witnessed by ancient peoples.
Right.
And there's a lot of strange ancient stuff about that, but
And it was Venus, right? And then Mars did it later.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And so that's another part of it. That huge gash in the side of Mars or whatever is like supposedly from a giant thunderbolt.
Right. Venus was okay. So like if you look at the ancient myths of Venus, like especially like most Western people are familiar with the Greek myths, right? So Venus is born from the forehead of Zeus. Zeus is Saturn, right? Also associated with Jupiter, but Helios is Saturn, the ancient version of Saturn. And if you look at their timeline, you have the original gods, the like primordial gods, and Saturn was one of these, and then the Titans are their children, right? And Kronos, the son of Zeus, like castrates Saturn with his sickle of time, which causes blood to fall into the earth and causes the earthborn. And then later on, Zeus, the son of Kronos, like defeats the Titans and they take over. So you have this like these three different, and you can look at these as regime changes in the solar system, like complete rearrangements of what was running the show.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
Right. So that's how they look at it. So like in all these myths, Venus is born directly from the forehead of Zeus, and so they're saying that like, and Velikovsky did this too in Worlds in Collision. He was saying like the loss. Okay, so when Saturn was captured by the system and ceased to be a star, because like you can't have two stars. Well, you can in some systems, but in the solar system, another star entering or getting close will cause it to kind of go out, and it sort of loses its ability to be a star. But that causes this massive.
Yeah, I think that has to do with something that like electric dipoles or whatever.
Yeah. So Saturn getting close. Saturn was a star, and it gets close to to Sol, our actual sun now, and like they have a fight, and Saturn loses, right? Yeah. And like so it loses its electrical potential, which means it has to blow off all this energy. And part of that, most of that energy was blown off in the form of Venus. Okay. So Venus comes out. And so then Venus is commentary for a long time. Venus has this really eccentric orbit Which, if you look at the ancient records, we have all these otherwise totally competent, very precise, sort of astronomers that like all of their other data where they were tracking things in the sky is just like spot on. Like they were, with the instruments they had and everything, all of their recordings are really spot on. But Venus goes all the fuck over the place.
And doesn't it have like the most regular orbit now?
Yes,
It's
got
like
an extreme,
really circular.
right. But if you look at it in the right spectrums, you see this extremely long. It's still got a cometary tail, right? But it's not visible in the visible spectrum, but it is visible in other spectrums, and it's got this long freaking tail.
Wow.
Okay, so Velikovsky predicted because of his his ideas. He said so. And at the point that he wrote the book, we hadn't gone to Venus, we hadn't sent a probe there yet, so we didn't know. Everybody was like sort of guessing, kind of like Mars. Are there canals there? Is there a good atmosphere? Are there people? Are there Martians? So he predicted that when the probe went to Venus, that it would find that the surface of Venus was incredibly hot, geologically speaking, very new. It's in other words, not 4 billion years old or whatever. It's going to be like geologically new. It won't have any kind of that means it won't have any kind of like what you would call ancient geological structures like mountains and shit like that. Like it was going to be a very kind of like a new surface. It'll be really jagged and shit like that, and mostly rubble. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was going to be incredibly hot and incredibly high pressure. And everybody laughed at him. They're like, because they all thought that they knew, because Venus is like almost the same size as Earth, just a little bit closer to the sun. It's going to be just a little bit warmer. Blah 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 blah. And of course, they set the probe there, and it was 800 degrees on the surface, and it's massive pressure and
Geologically new.
geologically brand new, and
and so they made up a bunch of shit to explain all that away.
yeah, they were like, well, he wasn't right. He was just
he was just right about
lucky.
that, but-
It was just a stupid lucky guess.
So it's really
talking about.
It's really interesting to try to visualize this for me. Like I spent quite a bit of time with a little neon sign transformer and various different materials and making electrical arcs and seeing how they move around. And it's they're like the arc would go one way, and then it just kind of jumps around to like different points and peaks of. Like one time I put it in like a little bowl of salt.
Oh yeah.
And just like I had the other wire buried down in the bottom of the salt and the other wire on top, and just turn it on, and it's just like it's like jumping
salt everywhere.
It's jumping around like hitting all these, and then it finds like a sort of a
it builds a tunnel or whatever.
Yeah, it gets a system, and then it's like normalized.
Yeah.
And it stays there. And if I just like disturb it a little bit, it just start jumping around all over the place.
God damn it.
So you can kind of imagine that right now we have this basically stable plasma arc, whatever, the going across the galaxy and where it is in our position right now is pretty stable. Our sun's lit up. All the planets have this pretty regular orbits. But there's all kinds of things wrong with our solar system when we consider it being created by the standard model. Like things aren't a
whirlpool of gas that slowly coalesced into stars and planets.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think that some disturbance somewhere, that can disturb this plasma filament that's moving through, passing through our solar system, and it really encompassing the entire thing.
Yeah.
That could just turn off our sun and turn on a different sun.
Yeah.
But that's one of the ideas, that Saturn was one of the former suns, and there's all these ancient, like there's this ancient idea that we are in the fifth sun right now.
Right. Now, if you take that literally with Thunderbolts, you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's hard to take that literally with the standard model, but with this Thunderbolts project, since like the kingship of the sun can hop from body to body,
right,
based on the electrical potential.
And then the planets would basically be rearranged based on which one became the star.
Yeah.
Because that one would become the most highly electrically charged and have the greatest magnetic field, which would then rearrange all the planets to orbit around it, be attracted to it but repulsed by it, repelled by it. So it's crazy. And then I was thinking about this idea of precession. Like we've talked about precession a lot of times, and you brought up the idea that it could be this wobble in the whole solar system. Yeah. So I'm thinking of it in terms of that, and this plasma filament, this plasma tube, has a resonant quality in it that causes the entire arrangement of the solar system to shift in this way that ultimately results in the background stars shifting position in reverse as to when the sun rises on the equinox. We look past it, we see a a certain constellation. But in 72 years, we see that constellation has shifted in reverse to everything else 1 degree. So we've always asked ourselves, why precession? Why were the ancients so fascinated with precession? And why does it seem to be predicting cataclysms and all this kind of stuff? So it occurred to me that if it is a resonant quality of the filament tube of the plasma that has created the current arrangement of our stars, maybe it's some broader resonance in the filament itself that results in this wobbling of the entire solar system, which could, like the ancients could at some point have figured out that this thing does predict so, the soul shift, the star shift.
Because that motion itself implies some kind of instability that the filament is fighting against, right? So you get this, and then it starts to...
So after so many rounds or whatever, or however it does it, the system falls apart. It's extremely likely at this period that it's going to change to a different sun.
Unless you kill lots of people.
Yeah, of course, because we're all electrically charged.
That's right.
But I thought that was pretty cool. Like that would be crazy if that's what's going on. That means that there was a civilization at some point that had this shit figured out.
Yeah, he also talks about. So you look at the dinosaurs, and you have these ages. Like, so there's these very distinct ages of life forms on the planet. Initially you have the age of the marine life, and it's kind of like I don't know. You think of it as the age of the algae and crustaceans, right? You have this, and then at some point you get the age of the insects, where you have like fern type plants and things on the land or whatever, and then it's a lot of bugs. And then you move into the age of the reptiles or whatever, and those guys. I mean, according to the standard model, and again, you have to think that we don't know how long ago this was. If we shift over to the Thunderbolts or to the electric universe, you have to, because all the ideas about constants being, constants of radioactive decay, all that falls apart. So we don't have any way to measure, and I think this already, that we don't have a way to measure how long ago these things were, because there's too many stacks of assumptions based on the tools that they're using. He did talk about thermoluminescence. He was like, well, you can use thermoluminescence, but a lot of things you want to date never were exposed to the sun, So thermoluminescence doesn't really work, and that only works with crystalline structure, like a non-opaque crystalline structure or whatever. So, anyway, the point is that like, I wonder if these different ages of life are also associated with the different suns.
And that's one of the things that he talked about too, is that like the idea that, and again, I'm not really well versed on all this, but he has this whole different idea of like how life comes about.
Yeah.
Due to these electrical changes and currents and all this kind of stuff, the electromagnetic fields.
Yeah. He did talk about the total impossibility of the standard model's like sort of idea of evolution as an accident. Like, he's just like, it's ridiculous, because there are too many, what are they called, recidivist systems, like something that can't work unless all the parts are there. Yeah. And if all the parts aren't there, then the parts that you do have are useless until you have, so like the idea that systems like that, like the eyeball is a good example. If you don't have all the basic parts, even a basic, even an eye that only can tell the difference between dark and light, right? It doesn't actually see anything. It just can tell you if it's light or if it's dark. It's a basic photoreceptor. If it doesn't have the sphere, a basic lens, like the hole for the light to come in, then the nerves in the back the rods and cones that receive the light, and then the nerve that goes into the brain, and then the part of the brain that has the actual ability to decode this information. You don't have all those parts. You don't have a fucking eye.
Right.
So how do you grow those parts, like, up randomly, and then have them be evolutionarily beneficial when they don't do anything until you have all of them?
Until you get it all.
It doesn't make any fucking sense. So, like, he points that out, and he says that, like, and I can't really remember what he said about but that there's a structure to life. I remember him talking about that, but I can't remember what he said about it. Yeah. We'll have to do more research, folks. Yeah. We're just like scratching the surface right here, but it's just really interesting. Yeah. The whole thing. We've talked for years about the problems with gravity, and the assumptions that are made. The problem with gravity is that it sucks. Yeah.
gravity sucks and it's repulsive.
Yeah, it's totally repulsive. It's a repulsive force. But okay, we lose black holes in the electric universe. That makes me sad because black holes are kind of badass.
And apparently the ability for time travel, like according to
he was, and there's no multiverse. He was like the word universe means everything.
Yeah.
So you can't really have more than one universe because the universe is everything.
Yeah, so it would be all those two.
Right. If there are many places, those are part of the universe.
But I definitely recommend going and watching some YouTube videos of his lectures and presentations because they're very compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Explains the gold fascination of the ancients, atmospheric insulation. Well, I mean, the ancients thought that gold was semen of the sun. So, it's sun jizz.
Yeah, that's another thing that he talks about the where these stars sort of I guess when they go out, they blow out all this stuff, and that's where a lot of the bodies around them end up with heavier elements and all this kind of stuff.
Or even because right now we're in something in this that the astronomers call the local bubble. Right, the solar system is passing through this thing called the local bubble, and what it actually is an inflated area of a very old supernova. Right. So this is why, even though it's basically space, but the individual particles in it in the interstellar space or whatever are measured at millions of degrees because they're still really fucking hot from having exploded in the supernova. Right. So it's not hot because the particles are too far apart to heat you up. But
the pressure's too low.
Right. But the individual, particles themselves are extremely excited still from the supernova. The local bubble is measured at several million degrees Fahrenheit or whatever. So there's an edge to this bubble somewhere, which would be the shell around the original supernova, and it probably contains all kinds of interesting shit once we get there, which will be a long time.
Wait, we're not traveling through it yet?
We're in the middle of the bubble, so the edge, the shell itself, and once we've already gone through one side, right, and we're now in the middle of the bubble, and once we eventually reach the other end of the shell, hopefully we'll be able to go out there and get stuff.
So really the whole idea of supernovas apparently is bullshit too.
Yeah.
Because they're...
Well, the way they work.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely happen because we see them all the time, but but whatever's happening has a totally different mechanism.
Yeah.
I also I really like his idea of planet formation. That his description of filaments that are okay. They're not these enormous galaxy spanning things. So you have a big nebula and there are electrical filaments inside the nebula.
Right.
They're much smaller, but they kind of are arcing through this. So think of a Jacob's ladder. It's and it's moving through this nebula, which is dense gas and various other things. And that causes coalescings along the filament itself.
Right.
It draws all this material in. And so basically it's just generating planets as it moves through. It leaves these little spheres of material that had
electrically charged.
Yeah.
And it's
they all got brought together and then sort of half melted, molded, crushed, and vitrified. And then the filament moves on and this planet's here what do I do now?
But that makes so much sense on how, because this is one of the big things is how can we have gold on the surface? If we're all made of matter slowly coalescing tiny grain of sand at a time, due to gravity, which is due to mass of matter, then all the gold would be in the core and all of the lightest shit would be out on the surface. But that's not what we have. We have gold that's strewn in veins all over the place, and we have pockets
veins. How does it get in veins?
That sounds like lightning strikes.
Yeah, lightning strikes are liquid formation or
and
whatever.
All around gold, guess what is there?
Crystals.
Quartz crystal.
That's right.
All over the gold. So this is the other thing. Looking into plasma science, what people doing research on plasma, they're able in the lab to recreate these scenarios that we see around the planet.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to admit that some massive lightning strike, it's where did that energy come from? It didn't come from clouds floating
around. It came from God? Do you think it come from God? Calling the Thunderbolts of the gods? Yeah, but the gods are the planets.
Right. So it really is, that's just fascinating.
Yeah. So in Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision, Venus comes by and causes this initial problem. But then because Venus messed with Mars, right, the ancients are okay, Venus is gone, everything's cool. And then they're wait. And they notice that Mars is getting bigger. And they're fuck, right? And Mars actually does this in extremely close approach to Earth. And they have an enormous exchange. of electrical potential. So the idea is that like worlds can't actually collide. Velikovsky called the book Worlds in Collision, but according to the Thunderbolts project, these bodies won't collide because the repulsion is so strong. The closer, just like any magnets, if you have the north side and the north side and you start trying to push them together, the closer you get, the more they repulse each other. So the planets can't actually impact.
Right.
But they can cause enormous amounts of damage to each other by exchanging electrical impulses, which is basically like, so if Mars they want to equalize it, right? So they'll exchange,
Right.
and it comes across as this enormous lightning bolt that carves in huge gashes, like the Grand Canyon in the ground.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. He thinks the Grand Canyon was carved by a massive lightning bolt.
Yeah, and it's cool because they have experiments. They've done like lab experiments, and you can go see videos or pictures or whatever on their website, which is thunderbolts.info. If you go there, you can see these things where they've demonstrated, on a small scale, obviously, but because of scale invariance, it works. That they have these plasma discharges going across something, and then you see it. It looks just like a canyon, right? And then they show you craters. Now, I disagree with them on some stuff about craters. He likes to imply that for all craters to be circular, all the impactors had to be coming straight down, like 90 degrees perpendicular to the ground. And I disagree with that, because what causes the crater is not the thing hitting the ground. Like if you threw a rock into a sandbox, the rock hits and it makes this little hole. And if it's not coming straight down, the hole will be oval, right? But that's not what happens with an impact. The thing comes down and like it's going really fast, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 70,000 miles an hour, and it embeds itself in the ground. All of its kinetic energy is turned into heat, like because it stops itself, and then there's this enormous explosion. So whatever hole the thing made when it first hit is completely obliterated by this explosion that sort of digs the crater out. And so it doesn't matter what angle it comes in, if the thing, as long as it doesn't make an oblique impact, which is basically where it skips off. As long as the thing embeds in the surface, it will make a circular crater because the explosion.
So you could probably test that with like, explosive rounds of, like missiles or whatever. When missiles are coming down at an angle, and they hit the ground, but then they explode.
Right.
Like, what's the shape of the hole?
It's going to be a circle.
It's going to be round. Yeah.
Right. And I tried to demonstrate this to some people and actually I've been talking to the guys from Mind the Hive about this because they were saying the same thing because they're big followers of the Thunderbolts project. And I was like, okay, hold on, like. They're all going to be circular because it's an explosion after the impact that causes the crater. But you will get ovals if there's no explosion, but you have to have something going a lot slower. So we talked about the Carolina Bays, and those are all oval. Yeah. And those things were ejecta that when they hit, they didn't have enough to embed and explode. So they leave these giant ovals, right? Yeah. Makes sense. So, yeah. But he does have interesting things about crater chains. His suggestion that is a lightning strikes those crater chains, because that kind of makes sense. Like, I understand the idea that a cometary body will sort of break itself into all these fragments and then it can, like we saw with Shoemaker-Levy, but I don't understand why they should all hit in a perfect line. Like, that doesn't quite follow. Yeah. So, yeah, crater chains could very well be, from enormous lightning strikes, and they're everywhere. You go online and look up crater chains, and you'll find tons of pictures of them from the Moon, Mars, and other solar system bodies. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Lightning, folks. It's all about electricity.
Thunderbolts of the gods.
Thunderbolts of the gods. So worshiping the old gods is basically you got to shock yourself. Yeah. What time we got? What do we got here?
Oh, we're getting up there.
Are we getting up there?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
We can take a break.
Yeah, we'll take a break.
Uno más break.
One more break.
And then
I had something I wanted to add to this.
And then uno más.
Uno más.
And then
snakes. Unexpected mariachi. Reading and laughing at all audience expectations every day.
Oh, that reminds me.
What?
We were supposed to read like a...
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Damn it. Yeah, I keep forgetting that. Yeah, we got a review, but I can't read it. You have to pull it up on...
Oh, dang it. All right, well, you go on whatever you were going on, and I'll try to pull this thing up.
Okay. So basically what I'm saying is pyramids, okay? We've learned on Snake Bros from long experience that everything kind of comes back to pyramids, right? You can make a connection to anything with pyramids. It's like there should be a game, like 6 ways to pyramids or whatever. You bring up any random subject and see if you can get to pyramids in 6 jumps. Should be easy. But I was thinking about, okay, so these different sun regimes, like if this is true, what the Thunderbolts project is suggesting, and that like various gas giants in our solar system have been the sun at various different times, like Saturn and possibly Jupiter, Neptune, whatever, then that would, and in the way that they say gravity works, gravity being a polarized force caused by some kind of interaction with the electricity with something else, and that it has both a repulsive and a attractive force, then that could suggest that at different sun periods in the past, gravity on Earth was drastically different, explaining the dinosaurs' enormity and why they were able to build things out of impossible blocks.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that that this physicist guy, the Australian physicist Wallace Thornhill, talks about, like the bone structures of these giants. Giants.
Dinosaurs. Yeah, the giants too.
Dinosaurs are basically too big for them to be able to hold themselves up in our gravity.
Right. Yeah, he talks about how they initially paleontologists considered the dinosaurs, they must be
waders.
Yeah, waders, that they had to live in water most of their lives, but they found out that's not true. We have millions of footprints on dry land of these enormous creatures. So, I mean, if you think about the apatosaur or the alamosaur or the titanosaur, these herbivores that were freaking just enormous. I think the Titanosaurus is 87 to almost 100 feet long from, tip to tip. That's gigantic. So for a land animal, a whale can be that big, but a whale is basically a dinosaur in the water. He doesn't have to carry most of his weight. The water does it. You put that whale on land, he doesn't belong there. It's too fat. So if the gravity was far lower, that would explain some things. But, there are questions again with that. Like, how do we keep most of our atmosphere if the gravity was way lower? Like, I guess maybe some kind of electrical potential could hold it in. I'm not sure. And then I guess, I can't remember if he discussed that, the moon, like the idea of the moon. Like, I know that they talked about how various ancient cultures talk about the time before the moon.
Yeah.
And that the moon may be like not a remnant or a rogue, but like a sort of an exchange from the Jupiter or Saturn system. Because like Jupiter still has its little system. It's got like 60 something moons orbiting it, right? And Saturn does too, has, 60 something. But so like during one of the regime changes, we may have sort of may have ended up with one of Saturn or Jupiter's moons during the musical chairs that happened. So those are both interesting ideas. Like I know that Gamera, the guy's name is Gamera. I talked about him on the last show. The guy him and his father had been studying the different like stone work in Peru for over 70 years, and they have like the Hanan Pacha, which is the oldest, largest stuff, and then the next stuff, which is the Cyclopean shit, and then I can't remember what they call them, but there's 3 different ones, 3 different distinct cultures, and part of their theory, which I don't agree with, is that they go with expanding Earth and with gravity being less in the past due to the expanding Earth, idea. Well, I completely don't agree with expanding Earth because it doesn't make any sense to me. But their idea that the only way that these gigantic stones could have been placed is if gravity was far less in the past. That does line up with what the electric universe suggests could be. I don't think the EU says that this is true, but they say that it could be. So that's a very fascinating idea. And man, it would be great if we switched to one of those, like all of us, anybody who survives the cataclysmic switch to a lower gravity range. Like you'd be Superman. You'd be freaking strong as fuck for that gravity regime, right? You could leap tall buildings in a single bound. You know, catch trains, throw airplanes, whatever the stuff Superman does. You know that shit. So another thing that the Thunderbolts project brought to mind, like I started to think about, again, like I was saying at the beginning of the segment, you know, it all comes back to pyramids. So if these pyramid structures are being built at one of these transition periods between cataclysms or regimes or whatever, sun regimes, and I think that the end of the Younger Dryas is considered by native populations to be the beginning of this world, right? Well, maybe I guess they say that the glittering world is like 5,000 something years old. So maybe the end of the Younger Dryas was the end of the third sun, not the fourth. Anyway, the point is that these structures are being built during these transitory or, you know, liminal periods. And Brett was actually suggesting that maybe this was for stabilization. So if you have a sun regime change, for a little while at least, you're going to have no sun, you know, or the other sun is getting started up and you're way too far away from it, or you know, you're having to like all this. These musical chairs are happening with all the planets as they're trying to rearrange themselves to this new electrical setup. So if you're far away from the new star and you have a lot of life on the planet, well, it doesn't take very long for it to get really freaking cold. Like, just pay attention to when the sun goes down. Like, the temperature drops like 20 degrees or 10 degrees or whatever. So, like, if that happened, but the sun didn't just go down, but was like now a little dot in the sky, and it was going to take you a century to get close to it.
I don't think the rearrangement takes that long in the electric universe model. Like, the way he talked about it was that it's a very rapid thing.
But
so
rapid speaking in terms of what?
Well,
like years?
One of the problems is I don't think so.
Months? Still. I mean, like, it doesn't take but a week with no sunlight for you to...
3 days?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
Three days, but that's just one half of the planet. Like, if you had 3 days of no sunlight on the entire Earth, you probably would... you wouldn't get to, like, gas freezing, but you would probably get to where all water on the planet was, like, becoming rock hard, you know?
Yeah. I can see that. It's just... I'm just saying that the way he... the way Thornhill talks about it is that it's very rapid, which is, it's something that...
And is it inertialist for us? Like if the planet's being moved over to new places, like, are we feeling this? Like, are we responding with earthquakes?
I don't know if gravity is due to the electric field,
right? It may be moving it without,
right?
But there will be stresses, but it won't be.
But this is another thing that they talk about with, like, this idea of these UFOs being able to turn 90-degree angles without seeming,
because they have their own gravity bubble.
They're doing something with the
inertia,
right? So it would have to be that inertia and all, gravity and all of this stuff is sort of connected to the electrical.
I think he was saying that it's relative to the spin of all these little particles.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't answer that question. All I can say is that, and he didn't give a timeline in any of the lectures that I can remember, but he was talking about very rapidly changing position.
Right. It's just hard to tell what that means when.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, because very rapidly to a geologist is like 10,000 to 40,000 years.
Right. I know.
And for a physicist, it could be the same thing. Like this rock is very young. It's 800,000 years old.
But I think it's due, like the idea of rapidity is due to this. It's in contrast with what we should expect due to gravity, which is an extremely weak force.
It's the weakest force in the universe, but the only one that has the ability to reach all the way across it, because it doesn't ever drop off. And if it's not polarized, it should go on forever, because there's no opposite to zero it out. Yeah. Okay, so if the regime changes, still, like, but there's also a bunch of other shit happening, like various radiation and electrical and magnetic stuff. So you still would kind of want a shield, maybe. Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm suggesting that maybe the ancients built a pyramid, like enacted shield with this idea that the gold layer in the atmosphere, right? So this is to protect you from losing your heat as you're moving to the new position around the new star, and B, to keep you and all the other life forms on the surface from being irradiated by various electrical and other phenomena happening in the solar system as this is taking place.
Yeah.
So I wonder I wonder what they say about the magnetic field of the Earth, because like the standard model considers that to be caused by a solid iron core surrounded by a molten iron outer core. That's moving rapidly around the solid iron core. So you have hot metal moving fast around solid metal, and you get a magnetic field.
Yeah.
Like, is this also related in the Thunderbolts project? Is this related to this electrical thing?
Yeah,
which would mean our magnetosphere is related to that, and the Van Allen belts. And so if like everything changes, our magnetosphere might just collapse. And, no compasses work for a while until you get...
And the atmosphere blows away.
Right. And you just completely lose your atmosphere. Yeah, that would suck. So pyramids for protection sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Super shields. Okay. So I want to read this review. We got a great review from a friend of ours. This is on iTunes. So he went on there and he said, absolutely the best. Snake Bros sends you off into another world within our own, making it the most captivating podcast experience. So grab some snake bites and take a moment. You might learn a thing or two about ancient, mysterious space, pyramids, and them so-called aliens, and of course, snakes. Warning, 30% brain expansion may accrue. From Kmart, good friend of ours. Thanks, bro.
Oh, yeah,
That's
thanks,
a fantastic review. 5 stars. Snake Bros. So yeah, if anybody goes and writes a review anywhere, we will find it. We will read it on the show, because that's awesome, and it really does help us get listeners, because people see at least somebody is saying, hey, this is good. When there's nothing there, they're kind of like, I don't know. Also, this is kind of weird doing this in the third segment. Should have been done in the first. But other news based on the inside baseball / podcast news. We have an interview coming up that is going to be it's going to be awesome. Like, I've been trying to talk to this guy for a long time, and he finally emailed me back, and I was like, holy shit. And he was like, yeah, man, sorry. Like, I hurt myself and was long recovery and totally wasn't paying attention to this account. But yeah, I want to talk to you guys. So he should be coming on we should be interviewing him next week. And it's going to be great. This is the guy that did a follow-on to David Paulides' work on Missing 411. So he basically was getting the books. He was really interested in the subject, and he was looking at he bought the actual huge cluster map that they sell. David Paulides will sell you an enormous one you could put up on your wall that has all the details in it, right? So he's looking at that, and something is happening in his brain. This fascinates me, because this is a property of the brain that is not very well understood, where people see patterns. Yeah, but they're not clear, they're fuzzy or whatever, and then they just obsess over it. They're like, what the fuck, and they'll spend all this time poring over records and shit, like the guy who ended up putting together all the Sumerian tablet fragments so that they could be translated. Yeah, they're just hundreds of thousands of little tiny chunks of clay, and he got down in the basement and spread them out all over the floor and sat in there, and then one day he was like, oh, and he put them all together. That's an impossible task, right? But the intuition, just one day it's bam, and he just puts them together magically, and then the same process had to happen for the translations. But anyway, this guy did this with the patterns of disappearances in the 411 stories. And he started to see that the patterns, the disappearances take shape, and the shapes are all similar. So the clusters have these areas that are the same shape, even the same sort of attitude on the land mass or whatever. And then there's these various outliers that also have the same shape across these, he's like, it's very irregular. So he went to look, because he's got this pattern that he's identifying that Paulides hadn't identified. And then these outliers, the outliers will be, so you've got this oval area where the vast majority of the disappearances have taken place in this cluster. But then there's this weird, set of 3 or 4 outliers that lies outside of that oval, but they're always in a straight line with each other. They're perfectly aligned, and they're to the south of the oval. And this particular angle, and he finds this repeating pattern in all these, so he's like, I don't know if this is a distraction, but it's somebody just was walking along a line and abducted somebody here, kept walking and snuck somebody here, and it was in a perfect straight line, and they're consecutive. And then he's looking at all the different clusters. He's seeing this happen over and over and over. And he actually, because he had this pattern and identified it, he went and found new cases that Paulides didn't know about. Because Paulides is using patterns to identify the cases. And this guy found a new one and thus found new cases.
Wow.
Right. I mean, it's just like
That's
it's gonna be great to talk to him because like there's so much more detail to it, and I can't wait to hear him explain it. But I have his book. It's called Into Nowhere by Thomas Spriggs. So we're gonna be interviewing that guy next week, and it's gonna be great.
Heck yeah.
And terrifying. So it's gonna be a great Snake Rose interview. So back to pyramids. We talked about Tesla on this show a lot, or some at least, and we're both fascinated with him. We've done a lot of research on him and into his patents and ideas. And Tesla, like you were saying, that like Tesla seems to have moved into this like kinetic vibration regime at the end of his life, right? That this is what he was interested in, is like transferring energy by way of actual kinetic.
Yeah, mechanical vibration.
Yeah, mechanical vibration, which is like...
It was something that he dabbled around with when he had his lab in New York before he moved out to Colorado.
Yeah. But then he dropped it for a while.
Harmonic resonance, harmonic oscillators, basically. And, even Mark Twain wrote about it. He built these basically reciprocating motors that were tunable, and they had extremely regular vibrations. So he called it constant period. Like they would be very, 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 very regular. And then they had a high threshold for load before they would change their frequency. So he was able to use these in ways that, a typical reciprocating motor or some other types of reciprocating engines couldn't handle a load, or they would alter their frequencies based on small load changes. So it was very useful in order to study the sort of harmonic resonances in materials and stuff, to have this machine that had a high threshold for load that would maintain the same period. And he just kind of messed around with it in his lab, like, occasionally he built a couple of different prototypes of this harmonic oscillator. One of the things that he did that Mark Twain wrote about was he built a platform that you stand on, and he would he's messing around with the resonance in his body by standing on the platform and changing the vibrations until like he somehow found one where you stand on it for 15 minutes and then you have to poop.
Vast bowel movement.
Yeah, and you just like run to the bathroom and you take a poop, but then you feel great.
Yeah.
And then it became this thing in the lab where everybody in the lab just would like once a day go stand on this thing for 15 minutes. And they're all like he wrote about how all of their...
And this is Mark Twain writing, right?
No, this was Tesla writing about it. How all of their energy levels went up.
Yeah, because they were getting rid of these buildups of, or that's what the idea that I got, that there's buildup in the colon and other thing in the bowels of people, meat and shit like that, and these vibrations are breaking it all loose.
Yeah, and they all started feeling a lot better. They didn't have to sleep as much. They had a lot better energy. They felt greater. A lot of them had some other physical problems that just went away.
Oh yeah.
And then Mark Twain wrote about that. Like he came into the lab and Tesla was like, "Hey, you're going to want to stand on that thing," So Mark Twain was like, "Yeah, I went and stood on it, and like 15 minutes later, I had to poop, so I ran to the bathroom." So he was doing stuff like that. In one case, he ordered the finest steel, a big bar of the finest steel from one of the steel companies that they worked with, highest end material, and he connected it to his harmonic oscillator, and he was just sitting there tuning it one day, and he finally gets, I guess he spent like an hour or so tuning it or something, and he finally gets it to the right pitch, and then he just leaves it running, and then a couple hours later or whatever, the steel bar just shattered.
Yeah, it's like shh,
broke in half.
The fat lady sang for too long.
Yep, and the thing just came apart. So this was. He was studying harmonic resonance in various materials and the power, of that type of mechanical energy. Then, like he went to Colorado and he got into the powerless or wireless power situation. And after that all went down, he ends up back in New York later in life after he'd kind of lost all of his shit. He didn't have a lab or whatever, but he continued to work on this harmonic oscillator. He picked it back up. And that I kind of figured this out through reading about a lot of his press releases.
Yeah.
Later, when he started talking about a new technology he was working on called telegeodynamics.
Yeah.
And it was basically him taking that harmonic resonance and harmonic oscillator to the next level, to a global level, where you could essentially build one large enough and connect it somewhere, probably a specific geological location.
Maybe where the pyramid is.
Yeah, maybe where a pyramid is, and resonate it and get the right frequency that would be in tune harmonically with one of the Earth resonant frequencies, and thereby basically propagate a mechanical wave throughout the entire planet
That anybody could tap into, just
that
like
you
the
could-
whole idea
right.
of wireless power. Yeah.
You basically get the transducer, which is like the antenna, but it would be a mechanical device.
Yeah.
And I think that he was using either the air spring thing or it was something having to do with electrical,
Like the spark gap oscillator thing.
coils.
Yeah.
like floating a piston. I'm not sure which way he was doing it, but the way he described his original mechanical oscillator was the piston floating in air, and that was what he would just describe later with the telegeodynamics system. That basically you could set up a device that would then transduce the resonant harmonic resonance in the Earth right back into this machine that would give you basically a vibration of constant period that you could then pull off with a high tolerance or a high threshold.
Yeah,
for
and he
load.
didn't he say that the reason, like he said that the reason why, like he was like, first of all, reciprocating motors are dumb because like you get a motion going and then you stop it, and then you get a motion going and you stop it and you get it right. So that he was like he liked rotation, but he said either way, if you're going to use reciprocation, don't turn it into rotation immediately, right? Like he said that like we have these reciprocating motors, and then the first thing that those reciprocating things do is make it wheel spin, like turn it into rotation. He's like, that's retarded. Make those reciprocating things reciprocate something else.
Right, you can step it up.
Yeah, step it up
basically.
or have a series of them, and that makes them extremely robust, like you were talking about. They can withstand enormous amounts of load before they bog down or whatever.
Right.
And he said the reason why that like ours don't do that is because we immediately change them into a different kind of, of like mechanical energy, like rotation. So like our pistons are attached directly to the drive shaft or whatever that's spinning. And so he liked the rotating, the turbine or the pump or whatever. So that's rotation, and you could do the same thing with that. Make it, have it be in series or whatever, and make it very robust. And then you can turn it into reciprocation if you want.
Well, his harmonic oscillators start with reciprocation, but he built one that was basically two reciprocating pistons at right angles to each other. So the small one that was the initial reciprocating piston was moving up and down, but it regulated the motion of the large one that moved from
its
left
exhaust
to right.
was right.
Yeah.
I love that diagram. So Tesla's ideas though on wireless power. Basically, he described the Earth as a spherical capacitor. Right. Well, first he said that you can treat the planet as a small metal ball in terms of, conductance. Like the electricity moves so fast that it doesn't matter. If you have an enormous metal sphere and you plug a lead into it on one side and then you go all the way over to the other side of the sphere and then you stick a lead on the other side, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you put the lead. Electricity will move to it so quickly that it doesn't, it's immaterial. The distance is immaterial. So you can treat the entire Earth as being a small metal ball, like mentally. But because it has this second layer of atmosphere around it, it becomes a capacitor. So like a capacitor needs a positive terminal separated from a negative terminal with an insulator, right? And the upper atmosphere of the Earth is dry, is like extremely dry, sort of low pressure air, and that is a fantastic conductor of electricity. The few layers of atmosphere right above the ground level are very dense, and they're also extremely moist. They have a lot of humidity in them. That makes them a conductor, an
insulator.
an insulator. Like most people think of water as being really good at transferring electricity, but it actually isn't. So if you have the air full of moisture, it actually is an insulator. So you have a high capacitance upper atmosphere as the positive terminal connected to the sun. That's the power source. And then you have the negative terminal of the small metal ball or whatever of the Earth itself. It's all of its solids. And it's a giant electron sink, so it doesn't matter what the material is, the electron potential is there. So if you could, Tesla was saying, if you can bridge the gap between those two through the insulator of the lower atmosphere, and this is what he wanted to do with this tower, if you bridge that gap from the ground to these upper layers, you can begin to draw energy from the capacitor because you're basically crossing it, you're short-circuiting it or whatever. You can draw energy off of it. And the energy from the upper atmosphere comes from the sun, which drops like 120,000 terawatts a day every 24 hours into the upper atmosphere.
Yeah. So
there's plenty of energy to be had. So I was thinking about the Thunderbolts project and looking at pyramids, okay? This is like my favorite fucking thing I've done so far. Tesla, pyramids, and Thunderbolts, okay. The core limestone of the Great Pyramid and the other two pyramids on the Giza Plateau the core material is made of a limestone that's high in magnesium content, and this was on the code of the pyramids.
Yeah, the pyramid code. Yeah.
The pyramid code. So it's high in magnesium content, which makes it a good conductor. Okay. The Tura limestone, which made up the casing stones of the outside of the pyramid, have almost no magnesium content, which makes them an insulator effectively.
Right.
If the pyramids had pyramidions at their tops, if you think of it like the casing stones come up to where the pyramidion would sit, and then they stop there. So the pyramidion is basically...
Or they go across the top, even.
Well, I was thinking because the pyramidion needs to touch the core.
Okay.
Right? It's the sort of the lead that goes into the core, but there's an insulation around it. So, but maybe you're right. I don't know. I was thinking the pyramidion made of metal, or at least something sheathed in metal or plated or whatever, gold. And it's poking up.
Yeah.
So, like, they built these things on the Giza Plateau, which is like an elevated plateau. This would be at a time when the sea level was like 400 feet lower. So it would be closer to this proper layer. They're also in a...
Didn't they make the other one that's smaller? Actually, it reaches the same height.
Yeah, when you look at them from far away, they kind of look very close. The tips would be very close to the same height.
Even though the other ones are smaller, they're on higher ground.
Yes, they're on higher ground, yeah. And there also is an enormous aquifer beneath them in this high conductance limestone. Okay,
and they're built supposedly where two telluric currents in the Earth cross.
Right, and they're also built at the quote-unquote geographical center, meaning like if you take all the land masses of the Earth into account, and sort of like look at them, the place where the pyramid is the average center of all those land masses.
Right.
Which makes it the best location on the Earth at this time to put a negative terminal for the negative, right?
Yeah.
So if the pyramid was able to pierce, or the pyramids, whatever, were able to pierce the insulating layers of the atmosphere into the upper parts where it's more rarefied and thus a better conductor, with a metal tip connected to the high conducting core surrounded by this insulating material around it, then perhaps they were doing what Tesla talked about, and it was actually beginning to draw energy from the upper atmosphere, the positive side of the capacitor, across through the pyramid. And then they had these weird structures inside of it, which had to have been doing something with all this energy passing through them, right? Various like shafts and doors with copper handles and fucking, like giant stones that are supposed to move whether up or down at the portcullis, or these huge like plugging stones,
Yeah, I was just listening to episode 33, and you're talking about Gantenbrink and like him, studying the small chambers that or
the shafts
that go up. And in the Queen's Chamber, you were talking about how they, why would they build these shafts in the walls, where you couldn't even see them from the Queen's Chamber, but then you open it up and he drives this thing up there, and then it ends in a door, and then you go through that door and there's just another door.
What's
and
this?
It's like,
another door?
It's like, why did they, and the other thing you were saying is when you get to the end of that shaft, it starts to become that polished, like Tura limestone.
That's right.
Okay. So in that podcast, like I was saying, well, I don't remember what the deal was, but it was like, why would they do this when you can't see it? Why would they be, why would they?
Right, because that highly polished Tura limestone is associated with things we can see because it's usually
Right. So I was thinking after listening to that today that like, well, it's more like you're exploring the inside of a machine. It was never meant to be seen.
Right.
None of it needed to be seen, but it had to be built in a specific way to do what the function of the machine was.
Right. So the end of that shaft, for whatever reason, is insulated.
Yeah, and this whole idea of the sarcophagus sitting in the king's chamber that needed a body in it, it's too big. It's like, no, it didn't.
Yeah.
It could have had liquid mercury or some other crazy shit
Man,
inside
that would be
it.
badass.
And like we were talking about in another episode that granite is radioactive.
Yes, radon. Yeah.
There's so much associated. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't have anywhere to go with this except the idea that the pyramid could have been acting as like the Tesla tower. Like it's like laying across the two terminals of this enormous capacitor, right? And if you can control the flow,
and maybe they controlled it by one of the two shafts in the king's chamber that came out,
right? Yeah, and again, like I think I was telling you this last night, but if you look at the subterranean chamber, there's these two weird, like mound shapes. Yeah, it's kind of like weird, like hillocks or whatever. These strange looking, just like lumps of limestone that are still attached to they never dug them out or stacked anything up. It's sort of like they left this there when they were hollowing out the subterranean chamber. And I was thinking, like, so if you think of those as being like the cathodes or whatever, then if they had water in there somehow, because they think that the Nile came all the way up to what they call the causeway, right? The causeways of the pyramids come off there, these roads that look like they come off the pyramids or whatever. And if the Nile actually came all the way up to the causeway of the Great Pyramid, that would have put most of the subterranean chamber underwater, right? Yeah. And so if you have this enormous amount of electricity passing through the pyramid down into the subterranean chamber, and then there's these two things, like, they're generating hydrogen and oxygen, like, in some kind of electrolysis, and that's like
an anode and a cathode for that.
Anode and a cathode, yeah. So then that's going up through and somehow they've got it separated to where this is the purpose of the well shaft and the other bullshit. So it's going up into the Queen's chamber, and then there's
one gas going this way,
and then you have these various plugs that move back and forth.
Like the King's chamber could have been the oxygen shafts that just let the oxygen
just lets
out.
It all out, yeah. And then you have the hydrogen being trapped in the Queen's chamber, and that's control, and that's why the hydrogen moves through everything, because it's the tiniest element, and that's why they left material at the very ends of the shafts, right? Because the hydrogen would seep through that anyway and get up into the shaft, right? And maybe that kind of controls it or whatever. And there's all kinds of ways you can go with it. But another idea, like, so now thinking towards the Thunderbolts idea and like various regime changes of suns, right? And this idea of, so like this would be a way for, like, okay, so if we have a technological civilization a long time ago, they know this is about to happen because they can see it in the stars. They see this change coming. They don't want to stop the change. They know it's going to happen, but what they do want to do is sort of
protect the Earth.
Yeah, mitigate all possible damage that they can to the Earth itself as all this cataclysmic, like, enormous changes are happening. So they build this like global, force field thing based on pyramids and the Earth's energy that it's got collected from the sun before it goes out. So there's a shitload of energy in the capacitor. If you can build a system that will sort of put a magnetic or whatever kind of shield around the entire planet for the, like you said, very short duration of all this movement, and like who knows what kind of horrible radiation, like they said, that certain plasma forms will just kill everything that sees it, right? Because it's putting out all this terrible radiation.
Yeah.
If they can insulate the planet to both hold in its heat and to protect everybody from all this various bombardment of like these horrible high vibration particles that destroy everything, then that maybe
maintain a magnetic field by way of electricity.
Yes, using the inherent capacitor of the Earth itself to generate a magnetosphere, which is what we get from the magnetic field of the Earth interacting with the solar particles. It makes this sphere around the planet that is basically a shell or a shield. So like if the electrical potential, the filament just disappears or everything changes, suddenly the Earth's magnetic shields drop, and we're like totally exposed to all this terrible radiation that's in space, and it would start killing everything, right? Even if it didn't stay dark enough for everything to freeze to death, everything would start dying from radiation exposure. Yeah. So if they put whatever gold dust in this upper layer of the atmosphere, and then like use the pyramids or whatever, and I don't know how they would do it, but like Tesla talked about, fluorescing that layer, then you would basically have this shield. I mean, it's an interesting idea, way out there and probably totally not true, but still, it's really cool.
Hell yeah! But it's one cool way to sort of play around with that idea is to imagine like all the megalithic structures. I knew Brett was going to throw that in there.
Here it comes. Here we go with the ancient swastika, the symbol of pyramid power. And
so taking that idea that it was one, it's sort of the Tower of Babel idea, right? It was all men, all people were of one language. In other words, they all had this one directive, this one goal.
Yeah.
And that goal was, we've got to protect our world from this destruction. So you're looking all over the world and you're finding these pyramids, and they're all built with this sort of similar way of building things and all that kind of shit. You look at all of that as being built by the same global culture, and start to try to devise like this story, like what happened, because we like the standard model is that everybody was building these all at different times.
Right. It's called the isolationism, basically.
Right. But it would be interesting to just like sort of start collecting all of this data and imagining that it was all one culture, one global culture that was building all of this stuff at the same time. And then
for a single purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. For a single purpose. And we have Giza, which has definite, astronomical markers that tell us something about the time.
Yeah.
That the alignments and everything that they were, how they were doing this. And it all comes down to roughly around 12,000 years ago.
Right.
When
some regime change was taking
massive
place.
cataclysm took place. So it's like those things serve their purposes. We're still here. A lot of people died anyway, and they don't work anymore.
Completely, yeah. They don't work anymore. And so we were a couple of shows ago, we were talking about the question of the lazy stones or the sleeping stones, like all over the world, they're doing all this work and suddenly everybody downs tools and they never come back, right?
Right.
Well, maybe after the regime change was done, everything was too fucking heavy for them to pick those stones back up. So they're like, fuck. So
they all cut one more.
Yeah,
and they can't get it out.
They're actually responsible for the same people are responsible for the second tier of Cyclopean architecture, because they're still massively badass stonemasons, but they just can't. They no longer can move those enormous ashlars, but they also don't want to cut them up because it's kind of like those are tombs they're like a marker, a remembrance of what was before. So they're like, okay, we were able to move and cut these, and we're just going to leave them.
Dude, that reminds me of this. I just listened to both Fingerprints of the Gods and Magicians of the Gods.
Yeah.
And in Fingerprints, Graham Hancock's talking to Natu Wajaja or whatever his name is, and he has this theory about
who's that?
The guy down in Peru he has this theory about like how
Jesus Gamara or whatever.
Is that who it is?
I'm sorry. What's his theory? I keep interrupting.
That gravity was different.
Yeah. That's Jesus Gamara.
Okay.
So he's the guy that talked about Hanan Pacha and Uran Pacha or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, the name you said is the guy from India that he works with in Underworld. Yeah, which is cool. I mean, you got a right name. It's just wrong place.
Anyway, the guy, this guy has this theory that gravity was different, right? That gravity, and in the Joe Rogan podcast, when he's in there with the Skeptico guy, they're just like nailing him, like, you obviously don't understand Newtonian physics, I mean, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm listening to this electric universe shit, and this guy's just like, so gravity can change rapidly.
Yeah.
It can be very different. So there is a legitimate theory out there, as legitimate as a theory can get.
Yeah,
that's right. It's being tested.
You said Skeptico guy. You meant the skeptical, like the guys from.
I'm sorry.
Not Skeptical.
Once
not Alex.
again, names.
It's all right. Yeah. Not Alex from Skeptico, folks.
No.
Not him. You're talking about the guys from the Skeptical Inquirer, like the skeptics, the paid shills. Basically.
I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. I was just like, wait a minute.
Me and these names.
Was it Alex? No.
Hadn't got my names down, folks.
But they were like, you obviously don't understand Newtonian physics. And Graham was like, I am not, I'm not pushing Gamara's theory on gravity. I'm fascinated with his concept of 3 different regimes of building.
Yeah. He totally wasn't pushing the guy's theory.
He actually said, I kind of
that's not the part of his theory I'm interested in.
Right.
And then later he says, I don't have to buy into his theory about gravity changing to
see what he's saying about the
right.
And I'm the same way with Gamara. I talked to the guy. He was in the Facebook groups I was in. I was like, but what is the gravity? But this Pacha stuff is cool.
But still, this physicist, Thornhill, is like talking about how gravity can change based on the this electric universe model.
Right.
And I just go listen to his lectures, folks.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And that I can get behind. My problem with Gamara's model is he goes with expanding Earth, which I'm just like, okay. The last bit to make the Earth expand, like because they always have this model of like Earth was half the size before, because that's what you need, But the last bit of expansion to get it to the size you are now is like 90% of the material.
Right. But imagine this that massive block from Baalbek that's like on the side of the mountain that they started cutting smaller blocks out of.
Yeah.
Like they're actually in the process of moving it, and then it just
suddenly gets
slams
heavy.
down.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, shit. Yeah, and can't pick it up ever again.
Dude, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about.
So I wonder, okay, so we've talked about, what the fuck is his name? The Hutchison effect, right? Were you talking about Hutchison before?
Yeah.
We need to take a break?
I don't know if we've talked about him on this episode, but we should definitely talk about that after this break.
That's right. We're going to have a snake break, and we'll come back after having some snake bites for Snake Bros.
Snakes! Podcast coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. We are talking about electricity and pyramids and
Tesla.
Electricity,
pyramids, Tesla, and snakes.
And snakes. Serpents of fire.
That's right.
Electricity. Plasma.
Plutonium. It's just fun to say. How's your plutonium? Good, thank you.
Yeah, so that was one of the other. I know we're moving on, but all the time we were talking about electric universe, I didn't point out that the guy also talks about gravity being a pushing force, possibly.
Yeah,
which is
elastic. Yeah,
yeah, very much in line with the elastic universe idea. And there's actually a name for that. I can't remember what it is.
A name for what?
A name for pushing gravity.
Anti-gravity.
No, there's a name for that model of gravity being a pushing force. I can't remember what it is. I have to look it up. Brett,
find it. No. Okay, so did I finish the? Yeah, I did. I finished the Tesla pyramids as super shield against regime change. Yeah. Okay. So during the break, I just have to bring this up. During the break, Kyle's like, he's trying to memorize the constellations of the Zodiac. And almost all of our interactions with the constellation of the Zodiac have been because of precession. So memorizing it as the actual Zodiac, you have to go in the other way. So it's confusing to us because I have them memorized in the other direction.
We were in the age of Pisces and now we're in the age of Aquarius.
Right.
It's the other way around.
Like in astrology and with the regular motions of the Earth, non-precessional motions.
Right. The yearly motion goes the other way.
So you start with Aquarius and you start going what I think of as backwards, which is, and so he's naming them off, and because I've most of my interaction with these constellations has to do with precession and the way that they interacted with ancient cultures, of which only are recognized all the way going back to Taurus. Okay, so that's as far back as I know, because I know that there were cultures before that, but archaeology doesn't recognize them, so there's no information about them, and so there's Taurus, and then you move from there. But so he goes past Taurus and he's, I don't know, what is it, like Scorpio, whatever? And he's like, no, it's Gemini. And I'm like, holy fuck, that's the twins.
Yeah.
And I know that I brought this up on a show about how there's this weird thing in ancient times, like pre-civilization or paleo period, where there was this strange twin god thing going on. Mm-hmm. Like at Göbekli Tepe, they have these stone circles with twin central T-pillars that are anthropomorphized. They are people, brothers or something. And then there's all these weird twin mythologies of the twin brothers of that make Cusco. They come out of Lake Titicaca.
Twin brothers that formed the city of Rome.
Right. Yeah. Romulus and Remus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The brothers that come out of the Lake Titicaca, they're given these two special tools from he gives them the something to help them figure out where they're supposed to put Cusco, which is the navel of the earth, and it's like a golden spear and I don't know. So
okay, it's Lesage gravity. Real quick, sorry.
Lesage's theory of gravity, huh? Lesage. Interesting. I was saying it's named after somebody, named after a guy. Okay, like a scientist.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's
anyway,
cool.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brett. So that's Gemini. Like the weird twin stuff that shows up in this period is like that's 2,000 years of Gemini. Just like in the most ancient periods of Egypt, we see bulls everywhere because that's Taurus. And then later on, there's rams everywhere because that's Aries. And then a little bit after that, there's, you come into into Pisces, which is the last 2,000 years, and Christianity, the fish.
Right.
Now we're moving into Aquarius, which means we pour water on everybody.
That's right. The water bear. Everybody get drunk.
That's right. Everybody get wasted, and we fly around.
The water bearer reminds me of Enki, shoulder rivers.
Absolutely. He's shoulder rivers, and he also represents the apocalypse of information. The water pouring out is a enormous flow of information.
And Randall Carlson is like, the book is open now.
Right, the book is open and we have the internet. So like all of the signs are there for this to be Aquarius. So it's crazy like how this stuff, you see it in retrospect and people are like, well, you're just making it fit. No.
Twin pillars, buddy.
Twin pillars. Somebody invented the internet at the right time for it to be Aquarius. Like, come on. Like, Al Gore doesn't know anything about precession, and he invented the internet, so can't say that.
Yeah, he obviously doesn't know about precession because he thinks we're responsible for the cataclysm.
That's right. Like, nope. And by the way, bro, everything is backwards.
But maybe we are.
Yeah. We are because of vibrations.
Yeah.
You got to raise your vibration. We need to raise our vibrations.
But that's really cool. That made me think that there's so much of Göbekli Tepe that is yet to be excavated.
And will never be. Well, I know, I'm cynical. Strange German dies, never dug again.
Yeah. But it just occurred to me that maybe these stone circles, that like each one, had some... I know that some of the ones that they have multiple different
uncovered
symbols.
3. And they all have 2 central T-pillars, which is like Gemini. Yeah, the twins.
But it'd be interesting if there was like sets of each age, sets of rings of each age.
What did you say was... Okay, Cancer is before... Cancer is the next one, right? So Gemini and then Cancer before you get to Leo?
It's let's see.
Like Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo? Or is it Cancer, Gemini? I don't know.
It's Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, yeah.
Okay, so Cancer, I wonder if Cancer, it's a crab these days, but I wonder if in ancient times it could have been the enormously fat woman. Because there are those weird, this weird, mother goddess cult that shows this corpulent, enormously fat, reclining, woman, she's huge and she's got this little skirt on and it's a very strange thing, but it's the same deal, worship all over the planet. So it's ubiquitous enough to make me think that that was their symbol for the crab. It was instead of I'm gonna have to look at the constellation. Can it be a fat woman instead of a crab? That'd be. It
kind of really looks like, if I were to describe it, I see how they say it's a crab because it's got these 2 stars that stick out at angles on either side, but it's like a torso that's laying down sideways, and the head of it, the head of it would be pointed at Leo.
Oh, okay.
And the 2 arms go out on either side, up and down. Really, if it was pointed sideways at Leo to the left.
Okay.
So I don't know. It could be.
Yeah,
they don't all look like what they're supposed to look like.
Right. But all the reclining goddess carvings look exactly the same. The posture, everything is precisely,
Yeah.
She has this same, and that looks star-based to me, because that's, when you see that kind of thing where they're people are depicting this image of some animal or whatever, but it's always the same. The posture's the same across the world. I think it's because people are they're imprinting the image from the stars, and that's how that's how Orion's like this, and so you always draw him like that, right? And stars are something that we all see all over the globe. So if you're representing that constellation, and you have a figure in your mind for it. So anyway,
there's a couple. I mean, Taurus is this V shape.
Yeah,
so you can imagine it's a pointed head, and then
the horns
up high above it are bright stars in the shape of sort of horns.
Yeah. And there's a faint body, but I mean, like, it's hard for us to see now, but I imagine in ancient times when if there was like less light pollution, just like less, reflective light in the atmosphere, that maybe they could see.
I don't know. I don't see a body at all.
We should go to the high desert sometime and just like look and because I keep hearing people say that like you get up there where the air is really clear and it's, there's very little, it's, whatever, a tin dark, and you just can see everything.
Yeah.
I wonder what the constellations look like then if you could just really easily see them. Anyway, that was just a revelation for me. Like, holy fuck, the twin worship is Gemini.
That's badass.
Wow. Because that has been a mystery that I've been asking questions about that for fucking 10 years. Like, what is this thing with the weird twins that pops up out of nowhere? Obviously, it's Gemini. Seems obvious in retrospect. Feel stupid.
Yeah, but that's great. Like that's the kind of stuff that's why we started Snake Bros.
That's right.
So we can
sit around feeling dumb for not thinking this shit earlier.
Exactly. But it's these types of conversations that cause these types of revelations to happen. I mean, if we don't ever talk about this shit, folks, we don't ever really think about stuff that we didn't think about before. And
that's right.
It's like really hard.
Like, even if you do manage to have like an original thought on your own, if you don't share it almost immediately, you're not going to have another one for a really long time. But if I say like, holy fuck, bro, it's Gemini the twins, and then he says a bunch of shit, and then I'm like, holy shit, and then it keeps going back and forth, and you feed off of it. Yeah. Like the other one that we just had was like, okay, if the Thunderbolts or electric universe concept is correct, and that is a more accurate model of describing the universe, that gives us a mechanism for explaining the way that astrology seems to affect how people are when they're born, right? Now you have a network of forces that can transfer data or information to affect somebody when at the time of their birth based on the positions of stars and planets. Okay? Yeah. There's no mechanism for that in the standard model, but in the electric universe there is. And that's very interesting.
Which also, that's the same thing that gave rise to this idea that the whole clocking or measuring the precession of the equinoxes could be connected to this idea that there is some type of electrical resonance going on that's causing this whole motion to take place in the beginning.
Right, exactly.
So, and it's extremely important if you're trying to predict what's going to happen later in that, when we get these ancient texts that are saying, yeah, we're in the fifth sun and we were too busy getting married and just having fun and drinking and eating to pay attention. It's like, well, yeah, you have to pay attention to these things because that's going to teach you about the resonant qualities of the area of space that you're in to tell you what's going to happen with your sun and when.
Right. So it does give you predictive powers more than just predicting cycles. You're actually, if you can, so if you think like, so now kind of merge Sheldrake's idea of morphic resonance into this idea. Yeah. And then morphic resonance, if it exists, must therefore exist for the entire universe. So there are enormous morphic resonances that have to do with the functions of like large, enormous structures in the universe itself. And then, they graduate down to smaller and smaller into more narrowed applications to where you get all the way down to where you have these little bitty resonances that happen between you and your immediate family based on your DNA.
And you're all electrical too. Your body is electrical. It's all...
Exactly. And then there are ones that just have to do with you and your own habits because the morphic resonance is right. So you develop... So there's this, again, this interplay of duality between creativity and habitual, right? Like these things balance each other. Like creativity allows you to create new things to do, but habits form around these things you create, and so they're kind of always fluctuating off of each other, right? Very the creativity wants to would tend to upset the habitual practices, but the habitual practices would tend to kind of dampen down the creativity, which is like, so if you had nothing but creativity, nothing would ever be stable because everything is new all the time. If you have nothing but, habits or quote unquote instincts, then everything would be stagnating and nothing would ever change and nothing would ever get better, right?
Wow.
So they have to balance each other and they go back and forth. And this is like that interplay is like you were talking about with mixing cream into coffee is incredibly complex, right? Where it's happening. Right. But you can kind of back away and see it as a very simple, here's two things going back and forth. But once you get in there and you see all that shit going on, it's really complicated. That idea of morphic resonance and the way that those things are taking place, and if the whole universe itself is in some way, like consciousness is part of this. So there's there's like it's not meaningless. Like this stuff is happening and it's purposeful. So there's creativity and and habit at every freaking level. That's
freaking badass.
Fucking badass.
Holy shit. Just blew my mind, man.
Damn it.
Oh,
This is fucking awesome.
wow.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to let that one settle in.
Yeah,
that's badass.
Exactly. I mean, like this was all just coming to us. I was just standing outside talking right before the end of the show. So like I'm gonna have to let that settle too, because that has a lot of fascinating implications. So,
But that principle, like, just to philosophize here for a minute, like that is so relevant to my life. Like, in wanting to be creative, but then also realizing the necessity to have good habits.
Yeah.
And then I have bad habits that get in the way of my creativity.
Yeah.
And I want to get rid of those. And it's like you want to maintain this balance.
even if you just look at it in the musical spectrum, you want to be creative, but at the same time, you have these conventions of music that you're using. Those are the habits.
Yeah.
And the habits of those fight against the creativity of coming up with something new. So like you start retuning shit and and you like mess with your pedals and all that kind of shit, but there's still stuff you're not changing, like the guitar, right?
Right.
Like that's a habit that's not changing yet. Or the various, like the idea of the 4-piece band. You got the drum kit and the guitar, the bass, and the vocals.
Right.
Like everybody plays around the edges of that, but the habits, the big long-term ones are very stable. You know? And eventually they will change.
Right.
Because you go back far enough and you had like big bands and they had a horn section and
totally different instruments, different habits. But I've been looking into this concept of flow states.
Oh yeah.
And like some of the science behind flow states is like you have to break a habit. Right?
Yes.
Like you have to just break into something that you're doing. Like when you begin like as a writer or whatever, you sit down to start writing, and you get on, some flow, and you're just like, yeah, it's coming, it's really good, and you're writing, and then you kind of slow down, and then you're losing your sort of creativity.
Yeah.
Then you just snap out of it. You get up, you go off, and you do something crazy, like you sprint up a hill.
Yeah.
And then
Go dive into the pond in the middle of January.
right, you sprint up a hill and you just get your blood flowing a whole lot, and then you just sprint down the hill to get your endorphins going because you're just freaking yourself out. Like, you just totally change up.
Yeah,
Just
get all of your
throw
oh my
system-
god, I'm gonna die juices.
Yeah,
going.
just get the whole system into chaos, and then you go back into your study or whatever, and you slam a cup of coffee and smoke a bowl of weed, and then you sit down and start writing. Like that's one of the things that this guy he was talking about. That's what he does to get back into a flow state.
Right.
Then he starts writing, and it's like he's totally shaken up the whole habitual I'm sitting down writing.
Yeah.
And now he's got this whole new thing, and it's like I don't know.
That's interesting because like the reason people do base jumping is because it's instant flow state. Like all that stuff where they studied and figured out that neurologically this is impossible, that you can't jump off and like be able to steer yourself away from hitting the various things that are sticking off the cliff. But they do it anyway because they jump off, and the first thing that happens is like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, and then they suddenly enter this zone where everything's very calm, and there's a voice telling them everything to do. Like turn your hand this way, turn your wrist like that. That's the flow state. Yeah.
Listening to that guy talk was reminding me of the stuff that Connor was saying about that dude that would do the hang gliding or whatever.
Man. Fuck, that's a
and
great
like
story.
he would basically get into a flow state, and then he'd go to a bar or whatever and just be hanging around, moving shit around in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
With his hands, just like making a cigarette like flip around or whatever he was doing.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, just the concept of like air surfing these enormous storm fronts rolling over the mountains, like that's fucking badass.
Yeah. But he had this ability after doing one of his flights that he would just get into this state of mind or ability that he could make stuff happen just by thinking about it and moving his hands around or whatever, make things move around.
Fascinating story.
And it's like, you could think, well, that kind of sounds like bullshit, but I don't know. I mean, it's like so much of the stuff we've been talking about throws all the conventional wisdom out the door. And
right.
It's just the possibilities are unknown.
That's right. It's like, trust me, folks, conventional wisdom is like the only thing it's good for is putting it in the trash. Like, if it's conventional, you just get rid of it because it's wrong. And I could prove this by showing you that throughout history, we've been wrong about everything over and over and over and over and over and over. So to assume that we're right now is retarded. So, like, we're still
Also
fucking
wrong.
That's right. It's also wrong. Even what I'm saying right now is wrong in some way. So the idea of the advancement of science being us becoming more correct is like, no, it's actually that we're like perfectly wrong and we're trying to get out of that, but we should be assuming that we're fucking wrong about almost everything all the time. Just look at how many things that you expect to be working some way and they don't work that way, or it becomes, or it's more complex or more simple than you expected it to be.
And this is why we talk about falsification. Like that is the true scientific method is to seek what is false about what you think.
Right.
Because you can definitely discover what is false, but you cannot definitely discover what is true.
Right. The truth is elusive forever because
unless that what is true is that you were wrong.
Right. And even that could be wrong. You just don't know. That's the thing is we have
experiments.
Right. We have imperfect knowledge. So we can never know anything for certain. So like the only thing we can do is say that isn't right. Probably.
So Brett is saying that Cancer is based upon a Greek myth, a crab sent by Hera to attack Heracles.
In other cultures, it would not have been a crab. It would have been a swamp denizen. I don't know. If it could be a fat woman, I'll be happy.
What's up with the Chinese symbols? Like they have when you go to the Chinese restaurant or whatever, and there's all the symbols, the monkey and all these different things. Is that the zodiac too?
Yeah, that's their zodiac. Yeah.
Okay.
They put their New Year's at a different time, and but it's the same system.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah, and theirs are kind of cool. They got the dragon, the monkey, and I'm like, why don't we have dragons? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's why NASA's trying to throw in that 13th one.
Yeah. Yeah, did you notice that that's the serpent bearer?
Yeah.
The 13th symbol of the zodiac, folks, is a guy carrying a snake. Just saying. That means this is the time for Snake Bros. Right? The zodiac is everything, dude. Like, if this new symbol is appearing just as Snake Bros is appearing, then it all is well with the world. Probably. Could be wrong about that.
We just hit our 2-hour mark, but we don't have to.
But time isn't real. Point in that direction.
Oh.
Point in the direction of time. Just hold your finger up for a couple seconds. Yeah.
3.
Which direction are we going? I don't know.
Longer.
But I'll tell you one thing. We are traveling through time. So the idea that time travel is impossible is false because we are doing it right fucking now. But, okay, their constellation map is 4 creatures based on the cardinal direction and dragon turtle. Yeah, those are cardinals. But they are aware of the zodiac, though. The ring.
Dragon, turtle, bird, and tiger. That's very similar to...
Yeah.
To... What is it?
The beams?
The
beam says thank you. What was it?
We have the lion, the bull, the angel, or the eagle and the angel. Basically.
Yeah, and I mean, really, if you look at these stories, like these enormous, like sort of famous, like the wheel of time. That wheel is a precessional wheel, and it says it turns exceedingly slowly, but and then there's ages.
Hamlet's mill,
yeah, and then you look at the what's the other one that has the ages? Shit, I just had it and I lost it. But anyway, Stephen King. Like in Stephen King, he has the beams, and the beams are the cross that like the ancients would depict. You have a circle, and then there's a cross inside the circle, and that cross isn't necessarily the cardinal directions, but it is the season's demarcation of the great year, right? So it would go, and in Stephen King, it was like the turtle to bear beam.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like it matches up with precession in the concept of this enormous cycle.
The world has moved on.
Right, but of course Stephen King postulated the beams themselves were actually spiritually some way present, they were required to hold the fabric of the universe together.
Yeah,
and people were like trying to dismantle the beam by picking at it with psychic abilities.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And then of course because the turtle is the symbol of one end of the beam, like anything turtle related is very powerful, right? Yeah. That little turtle scrimshaw that they got that could fascinate people, and they were like, "Can I hold it?" And like, no. They start weeping, I just want to tell you, tears pouring out. Like that stuff is fascinating. And it's all based on this precessional wheel. Yeah. So,
but I mean, the ancients were doing this all over the place. Like they're building all these statues based on the age they were in and everything. It's like,
did you ever see the first earthquake detector thing that the Chinese guy built like thousands of years ago?
No.
I was like, wait a minute. It's supposed to be able to detect an earthquake anywhere on the planet, okay? And it basically was this thing, and there is like on the upper part, there were snake heads sticking out like north, south, east, and west that were holding a bronze sphere in their mouths, okay? And if there was an earthquake in that direction, the bronze ball would drop and land into the mouth of another metal frog down there. So we go dink, and he would catch it, and you would know that there was an earthquake to the south or whatever.
Whoa.
And it was like, so on the inside of the cylinder that this thing, there were all these very perfectly weighted pendulums or whatever that would pick up the seismic activity and cause this thing to move, which would cause the mouth to open and it would drop the sphere.
What?
And I'm like, wait, this guy he built this and then the emperor commanded, like, build me a machine where I can detect earthquakes or I'll kill you, right? Basically is what he said. And the guy's like, okay. And he made this thing. And this is like, 2,000 years ago or something. It's badass. Like,
What's it called?
It's like the very first seismic detector. Like, you can look it up. Like, they've got diagrams of it. And the Chinese also built these enormous water clocks, which were like whole huge towers based on water falling through all these systems of things to keep time.
Oh, wow.
Okay, yeah.
That's
water
freaking
clocks,
awesome.
dude. Like, now, and they kept really good time, but you couldn't take one on a ship, which means you still have a
Right.
longitude problem. But, I mean, how do you use a water clock on a boat? But they have these diagrams, and then sometimes the ruins of these incredibly complex clock systems that also kept track of the year and the fucking months and the motions of the moon. They were like giant orreries, but they were set up as a clock with faces,
Wow.
Badass, like the innovation that was happening back then. So
Yeah, we could do a whole nother show on that one.
yeah, like earthquake detectors 2,000 years ago, but butt flaps, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it for this week. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Laura for the new intro. Really great.
Snake Bros.
Sounds like you got a little helper there. He's badass. Just letting you know. And thanks to Kyle and Ty for all the music. As always, thanks to Aether Studios, AOX Productions, RK Enterprises. And thanks to all of you guys for listening. And
Yes, thank you so
make
much.
sure that you go give us 5 fucking stars right fucking now. I didn't say that. And that's it until next week for episode 44. 44? 44.
With our first author.
That's right.
So,
Next
check it
week's
out.
episode will be a first author, Thomas Briggs with Into Nowhere. If you guys want to check it out, you can get it on Amazon. And that's it. Good night, Adamu. Building an earthquake machine. Now.
With a snake.
Snakes.